Hello. This video is for those who have been struggling with SIBO, CFO. If you've been to naturopathic doctors, functional medicine doctors, particularly also if you've have also been to acupuncturists and they've diagnosed you with things like spleen qi deficiency and liver qi stagnation. You've been through all that. This video is for you. And you've also dealt with anxiety and depression and mood swings and just, your brain just not being where it could be and all those things. There's another component that I want to bring to your attention now that I think may be a new step that you've probably already kind of heard of and been maybe circling around, but maybe this will bring it a little bit more to the forefront for you as to why it might be a good idea to incorporate. And the strategy that I have surrounding that. It's not too difficult to start to implement. Like I said, some of you probably have already started implementing it, but I'm giving you another reason why it might be a good idea. And once you have that part understood in this way, you might resonate with it more. You might be starting to pay attention to what it does for you a little bit more and things like that, putting a little bit more intention to it, a little bit more frequency to it, and things like that. So, we're going to be talking about the lungs today. And the practitioners that I mentioned, they'll probably find this really cerebrally interesting. Um, so I was in a conversation about COPD, and I had learned that a very classic symptom of people with COPD, which is a condition of the lungs, is anxiety. These this population has trouble breathing. And when you have trouble breathing, anxiety apparently is a very classic thing that comes with that. Um, which makes sense, right? I mean, anybody would be nervous if they had trouble breathing. But the way that I've been trained as a naturopathic doctor is like the way that that conversation went when that symptom was told was like it was a classic thing when it came to COPD. And so my brain, the part of me that's like that naturopathic training, latched onto that because for so often, all that's been taught is that anxiety a lot of times is coming from past trauma, neurotransmitter imbalances. The gut and mind are connected, and so if the gut's not well, then the brain won't, be well. Or and then it's anxiety, or was it digestive issues first? Did digestive issues start with anxiety? We don't know. Da, da, da. And so when I heard that, it got my wheels turning for several reasons. Um, Also, going back to my training within naturopathic medicine. Um, which encompasses many different things as well as environmental medicine and traditional Chinese medicine. So we do learn a good bit of acupuncture when we're in school. So I'm going to go into that. Um, I walked into naturopathic school already having digestive issues. I was diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome. You can read about that on my about page on my website. Um, so environmental medicine class really piqued my interest off of one lecture, and that was saying if you have a case of asthma and basically skin allergies, you probably are dealing with an environmental case. So environmental toxins of some sort. Well, guess what? That was me and my sister. My sister had asthma. I had the skin issues. So I'm like, ears open, right? And we learn more, and it's still like, yeah, this might be something going on with me. So, but then I go to the clinic where the teacher who was the environmental medicine person, the environmental medicine doctor, and he didn't think that my case was really that huge on environmental, and he more so leaned into just digestive. So for a while, that was kind of like the end of that, but it never really left me. I was just like, okay, just work on this digestive, and then the emotional, the mental side came in, anxiety and mood swings and all of that. Um, and then the conversation later on, of course, this is not just while I'm in school, but also definitely developed even further as I got out. was the neurotransmitters. Well, the gut and mind are connected. There's a lot of serotonin made in your gut, and blah blah blah. So if your gut is off, then your mind is only off. Blah, blah, blah. And then came the conversations about trauma and looking into that and going backwards to figure out how to heal for blah blah blah. Blah. All of that still matters. So I'm not saying that none of that matters. It still very much matters. And for those of you who have gone those routes and healed, very happy for you. Um, there are a number of cases of people who had been dealing with SIBO or chronic, just even if it wasn't diagnosed, it was chronic digestive issues with the bloating, the gas, the diarrhea, the constipation, food sensitivities, blah, blah, blah. And they go and seek help, either from an MD, they got put on 2 weeks of an antibiotic, or they went the supplement antimicrobial routes or probiotics, this and that. It can vary per person in terms of what works, and that sometimes can be frustrating, right? Um, but there were still a lot of recurring cases. Um, and then also when I learned in naturopathic school was about the lung meridian within traditional Chinese medicine. And it talked about the lung meridian being your defense. It's like your line of defense. And so, per my history with allergies, and then I was dealing with a lot of digestive issues, it never left me the interest in the back of my head about how the lungs might be involved. And yet, every time I would go to an acupuncturist, I've been to several over the years, they tend to stick with only certain meridians, which is the spleen, the liver. For those of you who've been to acupuncture and you've had these issues, you were probably like I knew because I knew acupuncture, I would always be asking them like, which point did you needle? So I know which meridians they were usually on, which was the spleen, the liver, the stomach, maybe large intestines. If you hit spleen 6, you get spleen, liver, and kidney meridian. But that was really about it. And then if you told them you had anxiety, they do Shen Men and maybe some points of the Du meridian. Okay, so and stomach meridian. I can't remember if I said that one, but so I know that they were never touching my lung meridian. And I always had it in the back of my mind. It's like I just wonder. I didn't really say much, but I was just always kind of wondering. And so anyway, I went down a rabbit hole once I got that inkling about COPD and anxiety. COPD, I'm not relating to everything I'm talking about right now, but that moment is what I was like, we're going to bring that over here and we're going to explore. So, yeah, so as I mentioned, TCM, lung meridian, I'm delving deeper, right? And what I start to see is this concept of, like I said, your lungs are the space where you're really starting to interact with the environment, right? And I then was learning that essentially, especially if you are a sensitive person, and especially if you're an energetically sensitive person. And from my work with a lot of people with digestive issues, a lot of them are sensitive people, right? And that's not a bad thing at all. It's more about understanding who you are and what you need, okay? But anyway, when you are that type of person, you might have a thinner veil than other people over the lungs, over you, energetically, etc., which is a beautiful thing, right? For those of you who are energetically sensitive, you have gifts probably in part because of within that is as a reason. However, your filter is a little bit more porous, right? So what does that mean? That other things can come in that maybe you don't want. And your boundaries are a little hard, not as sturdy, things like that. So one way to help manage that is by managing the lungs, managing what comes in more than you are right now. It might be a little bit more uncontrolled than you might realize. Your breathing patterns might be not as optimal as you might think. Um, and what is every meridian within TCM has an emotion. the one that's attributed to the spleen is worry. So we can talk about anxiety there, right? But kidney, fear, liver, anger, lungs, grief. So even though I was talking about lungs and anxiety, keep in mind also a lot of people with digestive issues, they tend to experience anxiety and depression and other mood swings even potentially as well. But we're just kind of focusing on those, right? So it's important that you manage that space, that breathing space, a little bit more, putting a little bit more effort onto it. And that is where I want to introduce something you've already potentially been trying. You might not be solidified on it really yet, or you really haven't like really knew what the heck you were doing when you were doing it. You were just doing it because people said it, and you're like, oh, it feels kind of good. Breath work. And no, that is not where we stop the video. um, for some of you, breathwork is amazing, and maybe you want to leave now with the video, right? Because you're like, oh, I got it, right? But for some of you, it might be more emphasis on why it can be helpful to continue to do it, or maybe you really weren't into it, and now I'm giving you some reasons to think about as to why it might be helpful. Essentially, when you do breathwork, you're managing that space, that filter, that interaction between you and the environment better. And when you start looking at it that way, you might want to consider it being more of a must than just like a little pleasurable thing you do sometimes on Friday when you go to the yoga spot. Maybe consider doing it more like 5 minutes a day. Because maybe you don't feel like you have a lot of time. But if you actually start committing to like just 5 minutes a day, then you might start really seeing the differences now. So the other thing that I want to bring in as to why this might still also be a good idea is because the naturopathic doctors and functional medicine doctors, I think, are already starting to touch the lung meridian without even fully realizing that the connection is MCAS. Because when we're starting to get into the lung meridian, we're talking about these allergies and these sensitivities. And with digestive issues, a lot of times you're having this accumulation of various sensitivities. Your immune system is reacting to stuff that it didn't react to before. And then you got a whole nother system that you have to like deal with. It's not just like a little digestive thing. Now you have all these types of reactions happening in various different parts of your body, right? Just because of something you ate, right? And so the lung meridian is starting to work on that space, right? So we're going back into TCM where the concept I think that a lot of acupuncturists are working off of is that the spleen, if you take care of the spleen, the liver, you'll resolve what's going on with the lungs because the spleen and the liver do have a relationship with the lungs. If they are compromised, the lungs can get if the spleen and liver meridian. Okay, so we're not talking necessarily specific to organs every single time when we're talking about meridians. So if the spleen and the liver are compromised, the meridians are compromised, the lung meridian can get compromised. So the idea is if you take care of the spleen and the liver, you'll take care of the lung. However, people are dealing with stronger levels, more significant levels of various conditions. And so now that immune allergy terrain, the neurotransmitter terrain, etc., it's a little bit more prominent than it used to be. And so now it's like you almost have to kind of work on both digestive and immune and neuro and mood and hormones. Like depending on situations, like you might have to do all of it all at the same time, or at least in some sort of sequential order. Like you can't just leave one out and think it'll just get taken care of. And so I think it might be helpful for some acupuncturists to realize that um, it might still be a good idea to bring that lung meridian back into what you're doing with addressing digestive issues through spleen and liver meridians. Because essentially, the naturopathic doctors and the functional medicine doctors are starting to do that by working on the MCAS, right? And then also by working on the anxiety and the depression and just the mood swings that can come with when you have digestive issues. So all of it can be important, right? But we all, I think, have things that we resonate with that we don't need all of these. Like it's important to have all the details, all the science, But then there's certain things that you can lean into and just resonate with more quickly. And then there's other ones you just need like four parts of your brain to all come together. And then you be like, and you go down the rabbit hole, and then you come back and you be like, okay, okay, now I can see why I would consider doing breath work. And that is the point of also me bringing this to your attention, because it's important to just realize that like sometimes you just don't resonate with something because nobody has really just brought all four, five, 10 things together for you in a way that you finally are like, okay, right? And so even though everybody's talking about breath work, for some of you maybe this is important, and then for some of the practitioners out there, it's like, oh, I didn't realize that's what I was doing. I was bringing all these things together. And for those of you who don't know much about acupuncture, acupuncture's been around for thousands of years, longer than anybody you've ever known combined. So it is, and I think it's a really great form of medicine. So hope that helps you.